But it is for those for whom it has been prepared. Then the 10 heard this, and they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." This is the gospel of the Lord. Grace and peace be to us all this morning. Down near Stonington, Connecticut, up until about 50 years ago, there stood a statue, a descendant of one of the Pilgrims, and it was erected by his heirs in approximately the mid-19th century, and it was to commemorate his brave battle among the savages, who were said to have swarmed down upon this little town, and he, along with other brave men, fought them off. And so the statue was erected. However, that was a little gloss of the truth, because in reality, he and his fellow fighters snuck up on the Indian tribe at approximately 4 a.m. in the morning and proceeded to slaughter all of the Indians while they were just waking up, the men, the women, and the children. And so it was when the truth came out that a demand was made that the statue be taken down. And so it was. And the Massasoit Pequot Indians established an area that would be their sovereign own. And within a 10 to 15-year period, they raised up the first gambling casino in Connecticut. And so the memory of those Indians, you see, whose truth had been glossed over in the past, suddenly their descendants rose up, and they became among the wealthiest citizens in that area, in their sovereign area, and that is what you might call irony. It is what some people might call poetic justice. And in Mark's gospel, to understand the whole gospel, there is a sense of irony that runs through the whole thing. We are now in our 4th week of hearing these Markan texts. You will recall a couple of weeks ago that Jesus turned to Peter and said that he was going to have to suffer. Remember that? And Peter takes him aside and says, oh, no, not you. You don't get what a real Messiah is. And Jesus turns and says to him, get behind me, Satan. That's a pretty tough rebuke. That's not good. And last week, we have Jesus moving along. They're moving from town to town, and he hears them talking, and he waits until they settle in, and he says to them, I heard you talking. What were you talking about? And then they got red-faced. They got embarrassed because they had been talking about who among them was the greatest. It was like the Smothers Brothers times 6. Mom always loved you more. And in this morning's gospel, they just won't stop. Because who do we have? James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come forward to Jesus and said, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask you. Those who have kids, especially if you have a teenage son, who comes up to you and says, Mom and Dad, I want you to do whatever I ask you. You just crack a smile and say, yes, dear. But they did it. They did it. And so he says to them, you don't know what you're asking for. You don't get it yet. This is the third time he keeps telling them, your idea of the Messiah isn't real, it isn't true. So let me try this once again. Are you able to drink from the cup that I drink? And they go, yes, we can. Yep, sure can. Which proves how dumb they are. They still don't get the idea of a suffering servant. And he says, well, you will drink it, but I'm not about to tell you if you're going to be on my right side or my left. And this is the setup for the perfect irony. Now, the problem that we have when we take little texts like this and read them every Sunday is there's stuff that's left out in between. And among the stuff that's left out in between is that Jesus gives sight to two blind people. They ask to be seen, if they could see again, and he cures them. And so what the disciples, the apostles, are seeing is Jesus giving sight to the blind. And yet on this third request for them to understand what a Messiah is, they are mentally blind still, even though they have watched and witnessed two miracles of blind people seeing. And you see the irony? You see the balance that's going on back and forth there? There is great irony in the way Mark writes. He's tough, he's critical. If you were ever to read Mark in its original Greek, and you compared it, let's say, to the Gospel of John, you would see some incredible differences. John's Greek, if you were to compare it with English, it would be the King's English. It would be beautifully written. Mark writes with a Brooklyn accent. He's down to earth. He kicks the dirt around. He's all business. Things move rapidly in Mark. And he keeps setting up the disciples over and over and over until finally, even at the end of Mark's gospel, it is only one person who ever is able to profess who Jesus was, and it is a pagan. It's a pagan. Do you remember that? It was a Roman centurion who looked up at the cross and said, truly, this was the Son of Man. Now, if you want more irony, take a look at James and John. In Matthew's gospel, it says that their mother put them up to it. Hollywood mothers. Go, come on. I want to see my sons up there. But the ultimate irony is they want to be on Jesus' right and left. Stop and think of who is on Jesus' right and left when he hung on a cross, and see if that is not the ultimate irony. Thieves, robbers were the only one to fight his dying body. Isn't that irony for you? Look at the skill in which Mark writes this gospel and throws it out in front of us and says, are you the type of person who wants to go up to Jesus and says, I want you to do whatever you want, I ask you for it? Yes, sir. The spoiled children who have turned God, and even Jesus, into the ultimate sugar daddy, oh, just give me what I want and I will be happy. And it's as if God looks down and says the same thing. Do you have any idea what you are asking for? You see, we know the whole story, don't we? We know the story of Jesus. Yes. We know he suffered on a cross. He died on Good Friday. We know he was resurrected on Easter. The problem is, we're not to our Easter day yet. Our Easter day is our death and resurrection into the glory of God. The problem is we keep bumping into Good Fridays all the time. And at that moment in time, we want to simply say, I want you to do whatever I ask of you. Take this away. Yet I have discovered in my work with people and so on that the greatest lessons they've often learned were not the good times but the bad ones. They just had to know how to emerge out of all of them and to rediscover, to relearn, to put life together in some type of form that they might not have had before. And sooner or later, you see, we want to skip Good Friday because it really is distasteful. Hanging on a cross is really crude. It's the Roman death machine, and we really don't like all of that stuff. Problem is that Jesus says in Mark, take up your cross and follow me. Now, I am assuming, you see, that that has something to do with our daily lives. And so when we look at the text, we think, well, yes, that sounds all very well and good. But most of the time, because of our human brokenness, the minute that cross really bears hard on our back, we want to holler out, oh, God, I want you to do whatever I ask you at this point because I'm not sure I can make it. Well, neither did Jesus. There is the enduring problem of what it means to be human, isn't it? And we've all gone through it, and we'll probably go through it again in some shape or form before we all pass into the next life. The real question is how you want to interpret it. And at that moment in time when you really want to sit on the right or the left hand of God's glory, there comes the secret down at the end of this text when he looks at them and he says, whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. That is ironic, is it not? Because we don't live in a society where we want to be slave to anybody. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Irony is kind of a contradiction, isn't it? We thought we saw something one way, and all of a sudden, certain evidence is prepared for us, and it's thrown into our face, and all of a sudden, we have to think radically different. And if that isn't what Jesus is all about, I have no idea what else he would have been, because he turns it all upside down. I found this to be true about 6 years ago after my father-in-law died, and then my mother-in-law contracted cancer, and we had her in a nursing home, and when she passed away, we had to go to their house and clean it out, to prepare it for sale. And there were so many things there that were saved that were critically important to them, I believe, at that time. Mementos, certain sentimental things. Things that had been packed away, thinking, we'll get to it someday, and they never did. And all of a sudden, as we did this, Leslie and I, Leslie's two brothers, their wives, we kind of talked and said, you know, this really makes us think about what's really important in life. The things that they held on to that they thought would be there forever. How true it is we are born into life with nothing and we leave with nothing. The reality is, what do we want to leave behind? A house full of mementos, somebody else to clean up, or that type of memory that reaches out to other generations and says, well, he really tried to carry that cross right to the end, didn't he? Or didn't she? And I do have that memory of my in-laws as he slipped away into Alzheimer's, and as we worked hard to jog his memory with pictures and memories of what was truly good. And I think at those moments in time, drinking the cup, but they never thought they would have to drink or even anything. And finally, one last irony. He says to James and John, "Can you drink the cup that I drink?" And they eagerly respond, "Yes, we are able." They just had no idea that the last liquid to touch the lips of Jesus would be sour vinegar pressed against his lips on a sponge. And perhaps the memory of that was brought forth when this gospel was written. And when it was put together, suddenly, like blind men, someone did see. Suddenly at that moment in time, who a Messiah was supposed to be was pressed upon them. And all of these apostles, at the coming of the Holy Spirit on Pentecost, got it. And I guess the only thing that remains for us is to always constantly be looking at these texts and say,